Welcome to the Wilde Wealth Way. This podcast is powered by the team at Wilde Wealth Management Group, an award-winning financial services firm that provides comprehensive retirement, investment, real estate, insurance, legal, and tax planning services all under one roof. In each episode, professionals from the firm and our trusted partners will delve into topics ranging from retirement and the stock market to tax planning and insurance. We will even assist getting your kids into college and help get it funded. Welcome to the Wilde Wealth Way. My name is Jackie Yoder. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Wilde Wealth. And today I'm joined by our special guest, Michael Obenauf, one of our financial advisors. He resides here in Scottsdale, but he is also located in our Payson location up north. Michael joined Wilde Wealth in April of 2019. He began his financial services career at MassMutual before finding Wilde Wealth. He received his 2 Bachelor of Science degrees from the University of Wisconsin. And we are honored to have him here today with us. Michael, welcome to the Wilde Wealth Way podcast.
Thank you.
So just to get started, what kind of led you to Wilde Wealth in 2019? What made you kind of go from MassMutual to here? How did you find us? All of those good things.
I wanted to get away from kind of the proprietary product and having to have those kind of parameters around me. So I did some research, ended up calling a couple different places, ended up meeting with Trevor, and a lot of what we talked about was just the different resources I had available to me, whether it was the support staff, in-house CPA, estate planning attorneys, mortgage lender, realtor, some of the property and casualty stuff, which was all different from what I had in the past. So that was probably the biggest factor alongside kind of the credibility and the name brand awareness in the Valley.
Nice. Okay, so tell us a little bit about you. Obviously, you have a coaching background. You used to coach youth hockey. You are not currently doing that?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
Because of going to Payson. So that kind of took me away. But the last 2 years prior to this fall, I was coaching youth hockey up at the Ice Den in Scottsdale and wanted to just get involved with helping kids, especially in Arizona where hockey is probably not the most popular sport, but to learn it and have some coaching based on growing up playing it in the Chicago area. So I thought I could provide some additional free time to help benefit kind of the Arizona youth.
Is that something that you hope to get back into at some point, or?
I would like to in some capacity at some point. I don't know when it will be, just because it was a very big time commitment, 5-6 days a week, and then traveling out of state. But it's something I enjoyed doing. I just think it's a little bit further down the road now with me being in Payson and not so much down in the Valley as often.
So why don't you talk us through how you ended up in Payson, obviously with Wilde Wealth, how that transition has been for you. Are you loving it? What's the plus and minuses, I guess you would say?
I would say there's very few minuses.
Okay.
There's a lot of pluses. I enjoy being outdoors. I enjoy the small town feel. I enjoy that I can get back down to the Valley and get into 75 degrees in about an hour and 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. But kind of how that came about is Chris, who I work directly with up there, who had been up there for the past 15, 20 years, maybe even more, needed somebody to help him with his clientele up there. So it's been a nice kind of learning transition and being able to help some of those people with face-to-face meetings, especially with the COVID stuff going on and not being able to have as many of them with his lack of travel ability due to COVID. So it's been fun. The minuses, I guess, would just be that it's 30 degrees at night. But other than that.
So kind of walk us through, what has the difference been of being in Payson and working with those clients versus being down here in the Valley? What does that kind of look like?
It's definitely more laid back. It's not as kind of urgent to do things, I would say. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's been quite an adjustment versus down here. The hustle and bustle is a little bit more like a city type of feel. But it's been a good transition. They've been very happy with being able to have the face-to-face meetings if they're comfortable doing them. It's just been much different when it comes to kind of the conversations and the, I guess, desire to meet frequentally versus less frequently.
And I'm sure the office being smaller is
the office being smaller is way different.
Yeah. You don't have the crazy of Scottsdale.
Yeah.
So you're very active in the Scottsdale 2030 Club. Tell us a little bit about that, the impact that it's had on you, what you do with them, all of that entails.
Yeah, so Scottsdale Act of 2030 is a group of up to 50 young professional men that are looking to do something to kind of impact the youth in Arizona. This is obviously aside from my hockey stuff, but essentially what we do is raise a bunch of money for children's charities. So we have 3 events during the year. Obviously, that has been a little bit different because of the COVID situation over the last year. But we were able to do our golf outing, and usually there's a gala as well, and that's usually in November. So we just did this past year, but instead of doing the gala because of the COVID stuff, we did a big golf thing. And we were actually able to get within $10,000 of our previous all-time high in fundraising, which was, I think, about 512 the year before. This year was 502, I think. So we raised about 502,000 from that event alone. Last year altogether, we raised over $1 million for children's charities here. And it's just a good group of guys that want to make an impact. And then aside from those events, we have some other things like Kids Spree, where we take the kids shopping and buy them back to school supplies.
So with that, you kind of touched on with the pandemic, it's harder to kind of do some of those things. What's your next outing or?
Yeah, so we actually, I don't know. I don't think we've had some meetings about this, but we really don't know what's going to be next, because usually in March we do an event at the San Francisco Giants spring training facility, which is several hundred people, if not over 1,000. And it's obviously not going to happen probably in March due to the COVID stuff. So we don't really know what we're going to do in place of that, or if we are going to do anything in place of it just yet, but there's probably more information that'll come.
Very nice. Well, let's kind of switch gears. On March 31st, you're going to be doing our monthly webinar Wednesday, which is just an educational client webinar that we've been holding. You're going to be talking about the Roth Ira Basics and what that entails. Can you talk us through the importance of potentially having a Roth IRA and why it's important to have that conversation in March?
Yeah, so the reason it's important to have that conversation between that in March or before April tax filing dates is that you can make contributions for last year up until you file those taxes there in April. Which gives you the benefit of being able to do it again this year if you're able to. But the biggest benefit, I would say, just overall for a retirement plan is the ability to access money tax-free when you get to retirement. There's not many avenues in order to do that, but that is the number one avenue to do it, as long as you fall within those income limits. You're going to get everything tax-free later on. So whether you have 10 years, whether you have 20, whether you have 30, or if you're just starting career, sometimes 40, it's going to be probably your best option in order to access tax-free money and get some growth in investments to use down the line when you get towards retirement age.
Can you kind of tell us what some of those income limits are?
Yeah, so if you're single, if you're filing single, you have up to $125,000 in income to make a full contribution. For 2021, the contribution maximum is $6,000. If you're over 50 and a half, that jumps up to $7,000. And then if you're filing taxes jointly and you're married, it's about $198,000. And then it starts a phase out provision, which essentially you can still contribute for the next, I believe it goes up to $140,000 right now for this year if you're filing single, but it's going to be limiting how much you can put in for the year. So it starts a phase out schedule, but those are kind of the income brackets for making a full contribution.
And then can you kind of talk us through what's the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA?
Good question. So traditional IRA is going to be taxable when you go to take the money out. The Roth, you're going to pay tax now and then have it tax-free later on. So if you're younger in your career, or if you think that you're going to be making less money than you plan on getting taxed on during retirement, the Roth is going to be able to help you because you're paying taxes probably at a lower income bracket than you might be in 10 years from now. And then the traditional, you're putting it all in before tax. So that way, when you go to retirement age, you're going to be taxed on everything you put in plus those gains because it wasn't taxed when you first contributed.
Nice. Can you kind of tell us the importance of having the conversation with someone before filing their taxes and what the benefit of putting the money in there is for somebody?
Yeah, you can lower your tax bracket if you're doing the traditional route, but since we're mainly on the topic of the Roth, is going to be that you can put it in for the previous year, and then obviously you'll be able to do it again, and you still have up until that April timeframe. So having the conversation and seeing if it makes sense, because if you go into the next year and you didn't do it for the previous year and your income goes up above that threshold, you may not have the option going forward. So if you can get it in there, knowing that you weren't above the maximum for income that you could make, in putting it away for the previous year may help you, because you may not be able to do it this year if that applies to your situation.
So you can essentially lower that tax bracket, which everybody would want to do if possible.
On the traditional IRA side,
Yes.
yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so we kind of discussed, the income limits, all of that. But what are the qualifications to actually receive those distributions from a Roth IRA?
So there's several different ways in which you can receive money from your Roth IRA. And anytime, if you have a Roth IRA, you can always take out your principal. So if you put in $1,000 last year, you can take out $1,000. If that account's now worth $1,200, there would be penalties and other taxes associated, but you have to have the money in there for 5 years to qualify for your distributions. And some other things that would qualify for distributions: if you need a down payment for a first-time home purchase, or you're doing some renovations to your first-time home, those are some qualifications. If you became disabled, you can get money out. But generally speaking, we want to try to avoid those things if we're looking at it as a retirement plan. And then you need to be at age 59 and a half in order to get those distributions. And once you get to that point, then you can just take all the money out tax-free, depending on how much you want to take. I would say those are the biggest qualifiers.
Is there a holding period?
5 years.
Okay.
So 5-year holding period.
Nice. And then what are some of the different ways that you can fund a Roth IRA?
So you could, are you talking about where you would set one up, or just what kind of income?
Yeah. So what kind of income, how can you, what can you use to actually fund it? And maybe talk us through even doing a Roth conversion a little bit.
Okay. So anything, if you have an employer, you're getting income, you are getting commission, whatever the case may be, you can use those monies in order to fund the Roth. And then as far as setting it up, you can set it up at a firm like ours. You can set one up at a bank. You can set one up. Most places have the ability to set up a Roth for you. So as far as the Roth conversion, are you asking about going from traditional to Roth? Okay. So if you want to be able to, I've done this with a few clients. If you have 401k money, most cases, not all, but in most cases, that money is going in pre-tax, because employer contributions or employer match provisions are on a pre-tax basis in most cases. So if you happen to leave your company or your employer that you were previously at, and you want to roll money into an IRA, you can roll that traditional 401k money into a traditional IRA, and then you can do a conversion from traditional IRA to a Roth. So if you want to just pay those taxes, and you have the ability to pay those taxes today so that you can set yourself up to not have to pay them down the road, that is something that I could see being a major benefit for clients down the road. If they have the ability to do it, pay the tax now, convert it into that Roth, and then have that all be tax-free later on.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Okay. So kind of going back to why you liked coming to Wilde Wealth, you liked having the CPA, the estate attorney, all of that here in-house, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
Talk us through the importance of and how you work with your clients when it comes to tax stuff like this, and working with the CPA, but working with their financial advisor and making sure that they're taking advantage of all the best tax.
Yeah, it's very nice having it in-house from the aspect that I can pick up the phone and ask a question about a client's situation, or a question that they may have, and get an answer for it, which can allow me to have a better conversation, a more in-depth conversation on why we're trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. Because at the end of the day, I'm not a CPA, so I cannot give that sort of advice, but I can get that advice very quickly. So that's probably, the biggest benefit to the client is just being able to have the resources to be able to answer a question that they have that I can't legally answer, or a question that I have that I need to get the answer for them.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of information, but hopefully during your webinar in March, on March 31st, you're going to kind of talk through more of this with everyone. Your webinar is about 45 minutes that you'll be speaking about this topic specifically. So if there are tax questions, or if you're wondering if you should start a Roth IRA, traditional, whatever that looks like, I highly recommend you getting on Michael's webinar on March 31st. It will run at noon and at 6 p.m. on that day. But thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for taking time out to answer all of our questions. And we look forward to your webinar.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining the Wilde Wealth Way. If you would like to meet with one of our trusted advisors, please go to www.wildewealth.com or call our office at 480-361-6203. You can find our show notes from today's show at www.wildewealth.com/podcast. Michael Obenauf is an investment advisor representative offering securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer, and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. This podcast is general in nature and is provided for informational use only and should not be considered as specific investment or tax advice. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Keep in mind that investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Investment decisions should be based on individuals' own goals, time horizon, and tolerance for risk. Consult your investment and/or tax professional regarding your unique situation. Wilde Wealth Management Group has ranked as one of the top advisors for the 12th consecutive year on Barron's Top 1200 Financial Advisors. Ranked number 1 in Arizona for 2020. Award recipient Trevor Wilde, Financial Advisor at Wilde Wealth Management Group. Barron's Top 1200 Advisors, over 4,000 advisors who wish to be ranked fill out a 102-question survey about their practice. Data is verified and then applied to a ranking formula. The ranking reflects the volume of assets overseen by the advisors and their team, revenues generated for the firms, and the quality of the advisors' practices. The scoring system assigns a top score of 100 and rates the rest by comparing them with the top-ranked advisor. Listing in this publication and/or award is not a guarantee of future investment success. This recognition should not be construed as an endorsement of the advisor by any client. Through Cetera Advisors LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer, and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. 7025 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 115, Scottsdale, Arizona, 85253.